I stood there staring at the tall metal fence that now completely circled my ranch. A private HOA property, no trespassing sign hung right in the middle of the locked gate. I blinked. My own ranch. Fenced. Locked. Like I was the trespasser. I rattled the gate hard. It didn't budge. I had left for just 2 days to visit my mother in Houston. 2 days. And now, someone, or more specifically, the HOA that had been bothering me for months, had decided to fence me out of my own property. Not only that, the only entrance gate had a thick padlock on it. No combination, no spare key, no explanation. Just a smug little sign like it owned the place. But here's the part that will make you spit out your sweet tea. Instead of fighting, yelling, or calling lawyers like they probably expected, I went out and bought the small patch of land. The exact one the gate was built on. The land that held the only gate key. That's right. I bought it. And what happened after that? Oh, you're not ready for it. But let me tell you how we got to that crazy point. My name is Jesse Ray. I'm 43, a retired firefighter, and I live on a 40-acre ranch outside of Austin, Texas. After decades of risking my life to save others, I finally saved enough to buy this peaceful piece of land where I could raise horses, grow peaches, and wake up every morning to silence. Except for the birds, of course. For the first year, life was good. No neighbors. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your soul smile. Then came the HOA. Not from my side, no. My ranch didn't belong to any neighborhood. It was its own land, free and clear. But some developer decided to build a fancy new housing estate right next to me, like right next to me. And those houses fell under a brand new HOA called Pinebrook Meadows. At first, I didn't think much of it. They were the ones moving in next to me, not the other way around. I had fences, signs, and boundary markers, but those HOA folks, they had other ideas. First came the letters. They looked official, but I laughed at them. Stuff like, your barn color does not match community standards, and please remove your tractor from visible sight lines. I ignored everyone. Why? Because they had zero power over me. My property wasn't even in their HOA. Then came the visits. This one guy, Mr. Donald Snipe, came by wearing a little name badge and a smug grin. We're trying to create a beautiful, unified environment, he said. Your property is very visible from the new homes and, well, the board thinks it clashes with our aesthetic. I asked him if he wanted some fresh horse manure to go with his opinion. He didn't come back after that, but the HOA didn't stop. A few weeks later, I noticed weird surveyor flags near my fence line. Then I started seeing new faces. Strangers walking around the property line taking pictures with clipboards. I asked one of them what they were doing. They mumbled something about boundary reevaluation and rushed off. I had my land checked when I bought it. All the boundaries were clear and legal. But I knew something was brewing, so I visited the county clerk's office just to make sure nothing funny was going on. And while I was there, I got to talking with an older man behind the desk. He told me, "Son, if that HOA's got their eyes on you, they'll try everything. Watch out." He wasn't lying. The next week, I drove out to Houston to check on my mom, who had just gotten out of surgery. I stayed 2 nights to make sure she was good. On the 3rd day, I drove back, and there it was, a shiny, brand new silver fence with heavy steel mesh that wrapped around my entire property. It wasn't just a border, it was a wall. No warning, no notice. Just bam, locked out of my own land. And at the only entrance point was a small 5x5 plot of land, just a sliver, that jutted out from the new development. On that tiny piece sat the gate, and according to a fresh post online, that little land had been quietly bought 2 weeks ago by the Pinebrook Meadows HOA. They were smart, I'll give them that. They used a loophole. They didn't touch my property. Instead, they fenced around it using the edge of their new land. They didn't block me illegally. They simply secured their border, with me locked inside it. I couldn't even get to the gate without technically stepping onto their land. And because they now owned the land the gate was on, they controlled the only access, the only key, the only path. I was furious. But you know what they say? The best revenge isn't loud, it's quiet and smart. That night, I didn't call the cops. I didn't scream online. I did one thing. I called my friend Darnell. He works in real estate, and he owed me big time for helping him rebuild his barn when it caught fire 2 years ago. Darnell, I said, I need you to find out who owns the land under that gate. The exact plot. I want to buy it. He laughed, thought I was joking. But I wasn't. 3 days later, he called me back. You're not gonna believe this, he said. The guy who sold that strip to the HOA, he owns another tiny strip right behind it. It connects to the main road. He was planning to sell it later. I didn't even let him finish. I wired the money. The land behind the gate, the only land with the physical access to the gate from the road, now belonged to me. And even better, that land also held the tiny maintenance shed where they had stored the only key to the gate. But I didn't tell them, not yet. I waited until the weekend, the exact day they were holding a fancy HOA family picnic on their clubhouse lawn. I drove right up in my old Dodge truck and parked at the edge of my new property. I stepped out with a giant red, "No trespassing, private property" sign under my arm. And just as I was hammering the sign into the dirt, Donald Snipe himself stormed over in his polo shirt and khaki pants. "What do you think you're doing?" he snapped. I smiled. "Just putting up a sign. On my land." His face dropped. "Excuse me?" "Yup," I said. "Turns out the land behind your fancy fence, the one with the gate, doesn't belong to you anymore." He froze. "That's not possible." I handed him the deed. "It is now." And then I pulled out the key, the one key that fit the gate, and I slipped it into my pocket with a wink. "Guess I'll see myself into my ranch whenever I feel like it," I said, stepping past him. He stood there, stunned, but he wasn't the only one. The next day, something even crazier happened. Something I did not see coming. It changed everything. And that's when the real chaos began. The next morning I was sipping coffee on my porch, enjoying the sunrise over the hills, when I noticed a cloud of dust rising from the HOA road. A convoy of SUVs and golf carts was making its way toward the gate. I figured it was just some board members coming to stare at the fence like they were guarding the walls of Fort Knox. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. They didn't stop at the gate. They drove straight onto my land, using the side access I now owned, like they belonged there. I stepped off the porch, heart thudding. One of the cars parked just inches from my front steps, and out stepped Donald Snipe, flanked by 2 other HOA members and a lady in a business suit. I recognized her from the HOA welcome brochure, Ms. Beatrice Langford, the Pinebrook Meadows legal counsel. Donald didn't even say hello. He just held up a folder and said, "We need to talk, Mr. Ray." I folded my arms. "Then talk." Beatrice stepped forward, lips tight like she bit a lemon for breakfast. "You're being served notice. You are in violation of HOA zoning policies and are trespassing on community property." I raised an eyebrow. "Trespassing? On my own land?" Donald pointed to the fence. "You're inside our enclosure, the community fence." Beatrice opened the folder and pulled out a map. "You see here?" she said, tapping it. "Your ranch is now fully contained within Pinebrook Meadows' secured perimeter. As such, we've classified it as internal green space." I stared at her, stunned. "You turned my ranch into a park?" "Not officially," Donald said quickly. "Yet. But we have submitted a reclassification petition to the county. Once that goes through, you'll be required to follow all HOA guidelines." I nearly choked on my breath. "You're saying you're trying to legally make my land part of your HOA, without me agreeing to it?" Donald gave a polite smile. "It's for the good of the community." That was the last straw. I walked to the front of the house, pulled out my phone and dialed my cousin Travis. He wasn't just family. He was also one of the best land use attorneys in the entire state of Texas. While they stood there smugly, I handed Donald the phone. "Travis Ray, attorney at law," he said on speaker. "You have about 3 seconds to step off my cousin's property before we hit you with criminal trespass, harassment, and civil liability." Donald paled. Beatrice snatched the phone and tried to argue, but Travis didn't back down. He started listing off property codes and citing federal trespass laws. When he mentioned the phrase unlawful land enclosure, Beatrice's mouth snapped shut. They left. But I knew it wouldn't be the last of them. Still, I needed a break from the madness. So the next day, I decided to drive into town for some supplies and to clear my head. I stopped by the local diner for a burger and some sweet tea. Halfway through my meal, Sheriff Daniels walked in. He was an old buddy of mine from the fire department days. He sat down across from me without asking. "You really ticked off some powerful people," he said, grinning. "You heard already?" I asked. "Man, it's all over town. HOA board came to the station this morning claiming you're barricading HOA members and planning to start a sovereign ranch state." I laughed. "They're serious?" "Oh, deadly serious, but don't worry," he said, patting my shoulder. "They messed with the wrong Texan." I thought the worst was over. But that night, while I was brushing down the horses in the barn, I heard a strange noise outside, like shovels hitting dirt. I crept out the back, flashlight in hand, and followed the sound to the far north side of the fence. And that's when I saw it. 3 men in reflective vests were digging a trench. Not on my land, but right next to it, outside the fence, along the strip I had just bought. When I shouted, they froze. One of them dropped a walkie-talkie, and I heard the static buzz of a voice. "Keep digging. We need that secondary access by sunrise." They were building a new entrance, a secret one. I ran back to the house, called Travis again, and grabbed my drone. I launched it into the sky, recorded everything, the digging, the workers, the makeshift blueprints laid out on a folding table. And just as I was zooming in on one of the maps, a spotlight hit the drone. Then came the sound of a rifle bolt snapping into place. They were armed. On HOA business? Before I could react, someone fired a warning shot. Bang! Into the air. My drone tumbled out of the sky and crashed to the ground. I dropped flat behind a hay bale, heart pounding. Who were these people? I waited in the dark for an hour before sneaking out to recover the drone. The camera was busted, but I had already saved the footage to my cloud. The next morning I sent the footage to Travis and to Sheriff Daniels, but what happened later that afternoon nearly made me question my sanity. I returned from the feed store to find my ranch's main road blocked by a construction crew. They weren't digging, they were paving. Fresh black asphalt, bright yellow lines, and a big sign that read, "Coming soon, Pinebrook Meadows North Entrance, Private HOA Road." And at the bottom, "Property of Pinebrook Meadows, permitted traffic only." They were building a road through my land, without notice, without permission, without shame. And it got worse, because I spotted someone in the distance, watching from behind the new fence line. Beatrice, holding a clipboard, and smiling. They thought they had me surrounded, thought they could pave over my land and push me out slowly. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just Jesse Ray. I was the guy with the only gate key. And they had just paved their future straight into the palm of my hand. What I did next would set off a chain of events that neither the HOA nor their fancy lawyers were ready for. By the time the sun came up the next day, I was already dressed, boots laced, hat on, and leaning on my porch railing with a cup of hot black coffee. That new road was stretching right up to the gate now, like a long black tongue trying to taste what didn't belong to them. Pinebrook Meadows thought they were closing in, but I had plans, big ones. I called a county zoning inspector first thing in the morning, an old contact I helped rescue during a barn fire years ago. His name was Barry McDougal. Honest guy. Thick accent. Always wore a bolo tie. When I explained what was going on, he whistled so hard it nearly blew my speaker. "They built a road without a permit?" he said. "And through your property?" "Not only that," I told him, They fired a shot to take down my drone. "I'll be there by noon," he said. And he was. Barry showed up in a dusty blue pickup, chewing sunflower seeds and holding a clipboard thicker than a Bible. He walked that new road inch by inch, took pictures, jotted notes, scratched his head, took more pictures. By the time he was done, he looked mad. "They're gonna need more than fancy lawyers to get out of this," he muttered. Just as we were